I had to bring this one back into the living room this week because I have to sit down in front of the desktop to go over a whole lot of text. And I've highlighted the more crucial parts to get to for the purposes of this video, though I will post a link in the video description for you to check out about the birth of the big book. There was a website for a long time up. It's no longer online now. It's an entire book itself. It was called morerevealed.com. I found some of it on the Wayback Machine, written by Ken, is it Raga? I don't know how to say Ragge. I'm sorry. I apologize if you're watching this, but I really don't know how to pronounce the last name. It's a wellspring of information, though, and in his own website and he's got several books out there that have been recommended to me, but the More Revealed book he had went into this history a little bit as well, but he was talking about how AA was practically financially broke at the time that the big book came out, and pretty much in my close to 12 years in AA, 12 years, 12 steps, oh my God, it must be a God thing. The AA tyrannical higher power wanted me to suffer and relapse for 12 years in that insidious religious fucking cult for, no reason whatsoever. But the official party line that I was handed to all those years was the idea that, Abby came, saw Bill, Bill bumps into Dr. Bob somewhere along the way, and this program just turns into this worldwide phenomenon that has saved millions of people, which it never has. But that's not exactly true. In fact, I've outlined that in other videos. There was the hand of the Oxford group involved in this. There was the fact that Bill W. himself ripped off a whole lot of people in the process of creating this entire book, that the original fellowship was not no magical 100 members who put this entire program together. As a matter of fact, I think there was somewhere around 30 or 40. I'll have the information in front of me on maybe another occasion. And out of those 30 or 40, none of them magically stayed sober for the rest of their lives doing this bullshit. But the topic for the day is talking about the birth of the big book. And I don't have the actual link to the Wayback Machine with the book More Revealed. I'm sure the More Revealed book is available on Amazon, but I'm going to be going out the Orange papers here. And I'll be reading again from the article, and I'll interject along the way. But it says the story, the creation of the Bible of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is properly named Alcoholics Anonymous, popularly called the Big Book. Yeah, if you're in any AA meetings, you can hear the capital letters in the italics whenever they say it too. Well, the Big Book says, yeah, the Big Book is the only source of information you need, right? A bunch of ramblings from some con artist is the only key or that you need to life to figure out the secrets to everything. The Big Book is a sad tale of lies and cheating, theft and dishonesty, all done by Bill Wilson. Well, how come that doesn't surprise me? And even the death of an early AA member, Henry Parkhurst, who couldn't stand Bill W.'s scheming. First off, Bill W. was only one of many authors of the Big Book, and as a matter of fact, as we shall soon see on this video, a lot of editing was also needed as well, because Bill W. had no talent as a writer, and even with the garbage that makes up the Big Book, apparently the original writing was even worse. They actually had to put editors for that bullshit you've heard read in meetings over and over again, and the crap you've heard in meetings is very poorly written, very poorly structured, and just in general, not something that I would want to throw away my entire existence on reading a bunch of contradictory garbage for the rest of my life. But apparently it was even worse in the early days. And they needed editors who, by the way, never got paid any royalties that they were promised, and, well, we shall see. Bill was the principal author of the non-biographical opening chapters, the much ballyhooed first 164 pages. But Bill got lots and lots of free help to do that. There were at least 32 people who wrote in the thing. Just for starters, Henry Hank Parkhurst wrote the detailed outline for the whole book. And then he did write the chapters to employers, and he contributed one of the stories in the first edition called The Unbeliever. And it's hard to say exactly what all else Frank had to do, because Bill had a bad habit of lying and minimizing what Frank wrote, because Bill stole all of it later on. Bill W. claimed sole ownership of the big book when he filed for the copyright in violation of his promises to a whole bunch of other AA members who were all contributors and who all added autobiographical chapters and who were led to believe that the group itself would jointly own this book. Now, two websites he references here, I can't actually find if they're still online or not. I know there's one called www.aabbsg, that it says the domain is for sale on that one. And then the aapubliccontroversy.com, I tried looking that up. I tried putting it in the Wayback Machine, and I sadly had very little luck with that. But it's where he's referencing for the following information. Please note, Orange writes, that the author of the following table wishes to give Bill W. less credit for the opening chapters than I actually would. He says that an AA member named Joe Worth wrote Bill's story into Wives, and that chapters 2 through 9 and 11 were the product of several people working together. Although I personally, Orange Papers is saying, I feel that Bill W. is really to blame for a whole lot of the contradictory insanity that's in the first 164 pages. It's hard for me to see a team of people coming up with that garbage. I mean, I've read so many passages and chapters on here on this channel many times, and it's hard for me to see a team of people just coming up with a bunch of blanket assertions and judgments and all of these other outright commandments that Bill W. has that contradict each other. But hey, you never know. But who wrote what in the big book? Well, here he's got a list of like 32 different people. And like I said, I won't read through all of them. It's just a list of all the contributing things that they did, what was put into the second edition, who helped do the outlines. There were apparently several editors. There was another editor named Jim Scott, and there was a Professor Tom Uzel of New York, who apparently was also responsible for pre-editing. But after all of that was done and the book was put together in April of 1939, on the copyright application form, Bill W. claimed sole ownership of the copyright of the big book for himself. He actually has a picture here of the application for registration of copyright. In spite of the fact that the book had at least 32 authors, in spite of the fact that he had already been paid for his writing work as contract labor, paid twice already. Honestly, the first time when he was paid $1,558, which was a lot of money in the 1930s, to write the first 11 chapters, and dishonestly the second time when he helped himself to something called the Big Book Publishing Fund. And in spite of the fact that he repeatedly promised the 31 or so other co-authors of the book that it would all be jointly owned by Quackaholics Anonymous, I call it. The application for registration that I've got in front of me to copy here, you'll see it in the link if you click on it. It says, name of the copyright owner is WMG Wilson, trading as Works Publishing Company. The only problem is Works Publishing Company didn't exist at the time. First published on the 10th day of April 1939. Send certificate of registration to Works Publishing Company, and he gives an address, etc. Now, note Bill W. wrote on the copyright application that he was the Works Publishing Company, that the book was authored by WMG Wilson, trading as Works Publishing Company. Bill W. was laying claim to owning everything, including the publishing company, in spite of the fact that he had already sold a lot of stock in something called the 100 Men Corporation, which was originally supposed to write and publish the big book and own the copyright. I had never heard of the 100 Men Corporation before, but I went to their, what Armage has on this, and apparently, yes, there was this particular group of people who was supposedly called the 100 Men Corporation to publish the book 100 Men. In fact, I guess that was going to be the original title of the book, 100 Men. And of course, the entire mission of the 100 Men Corporation is, as all things AA, it's total fucking garbage. Listen to this particular thing that they had set out here. Wait a minute. During the time of writing of the book, and while sales, promotional, directional, outside duties are going on, the necessity of... Oh, that was the wrong... I messed up there. They were trying to say the doctors and all these other people. Oh, yeah, here it is. Sorry, I was reading from the wrong thing. Before considering the attached proposal for this book, certain information should be known by the reader. Okay. Informed doctors and psychiatrists consider true alcoholism, here we go with this true Scotsman fallacy shit, just as much a disease as cancer. No, they do not. The American Medical Association at the time this book was written said it had very little scientific merit whatsoever. The bodies of those subject to alcoholism have become abnormal in reaction and mind even more so. Well, you're just going to make an assertion without any proof, and you're going to use an argument of authority to do so. Informed doctors and psychiatrists consider true alcoholism. Wow, 100 Men Corporation. I don't know who is behind it, but it's the same old bullshit that you got in the big book. This has been called an allergy. Many alcoholics are men of exceptional character and willpower, not according to your own fucking stumps. As proven by the type of men that make up Alcoholics Anonymous. Among the recoveries are men from every profession and practically every type of business. People not familiar with the subject think alcoholism is a habit based upon physical craving. This is absolutely not true, for when not drinking, no physical craving exists. Sounds like the 100 Men Corporation here, whoever the fuck they are, were contradicting their own literature. And I'm not going to read all of that there, but I did not know about this 100 Men Corporation who were supposed to write and publish the big book and own the copyright. But whoever they were, I'd have to do more research in that. That might be a whole nother video in of itself. You got to kind of wonder when a book, when people are lying about the origins of a book, when people are lying about how the book came about, when the author is pretty dishonest about what he was doing and then has sort of manipulated everything where he got to make a whole lot of money off of it, kind of doesn't sound like some wonderful spiritual program that got beamed down out of the heavens by some higher power that wanted Bill W. to publish this book. Sounds more like kind of like something fraudulent. Yeah. Dr. Bob's daughter, I'm going back to the original page, Sue Smith Windows of Akron, Ohio, says that Bill W. stole the copyright of the big book. She submitted a notarized statement to German courts that they are dealing with, or were dealing with, I don't know by now, with the AA Big Book copyright lawsuits. But Sue Smith Windows writes, the original 100 Men Corporation as publishers of the book, which became known as Alcoholics Anonymous, sold stock shares with a par value of $25 each. It's also my understanding that this corporation was never legally incorporated in the state of New York or anywhere else, and thus could not have legally sold shares except by fraudulent means. I'd have to do a lot more digging here with this one. To the best of my recollection, she writes, Bill W. used the money from these shares as well as other donations to the 100 Men Corporation in order to create his own corporation, Works Publishing Company. Bill then registered the book with the United States Copyright Office in the spring of 1939 under his own name as sole author and trading as Works Publishing Company without the knowledge and consent of neither my father or any of the other members from the group in Ohio at the time. A majority of members of this AA fellowship resided in Akron and Cleveland, Ohio, and the New York contingent was comprised of approximately 20 people at the time. So much for the first magical 100, eh? Mr. Henry G. Parkhurst, she wrote, another early member of the New York group from New Jersey, wrote the outline for the book and at least one complete chapter. An AA historian who is writing Frank P.'s biography has reported that Bill W.'s refusal to recognize him as the author of at least that chapter was one of the factors in Hank eventually splitting with AA altogether. It's my understanding that Bill W. took sole ownership of the book as a copyright holder, despite the fact that he was not the writer, and thus unlawfully copyrighted the book under his own name on April 10, 1939. The true authors of this book were the members of the fellowship. The personal stories were written by individual members and edited by Jim Scott, an Akron, Ohio member. No wonder they all read in that same boring style, you know. Bill W. also did not write the first 11 chapters. He only wrote a lengthy life story of his own, which was typed out by Ruth Haack. He included a bunch of resentments in a report about what Abby Thatcher supposedly told him, so he didn't even write any of that shit. This piece was written so poorly that it could only be used for the book after Joe Worth, a member of the New York group and a successful professional founder and editor of New York Magazine, tried to rewrite the entire thing from the ground up. I know Bill W. was no way the author of Alcoholics Anonymous, but he was simply just a promoter. He himself admitted to his being more of an umpire than ever an author of this book. In Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, Bill W. is quoted as saying, "Bob was far ahead of me in any sort of activities. I was always rushing around talking and organizing and teaching kindergarten. I never grew up myself, and I can confirm that." Rather than argue with and possibly embarrass Bill W., my father chose not to expose Bill for a lot of his devious ways, simply for the good of the fellowship. You know, there's several stories like this, by the way, when it comes to AA history. There was a guy named Tom Powers who split up with AA and Bill W. in the 1950s because he was so disgusted with him. And it was said somewhere that in his later years, people actually came to see him to find out what the real story was behind Bill W., and he sent all those people away because he said the program was perfect and came from God and he couldn't afford to destroy it. Meaning more than likely what really went on in the early days, we'll probably never even know. It could have been 10 times worse. Probably is 10 times worse, because why else would they need to hide it? Okay. One of the authors, she wrote, of the personal story that appeared in the original manuscript from Akron asked that his story be removed from the book prior to publication after finding out about Bill's personal financial aspirations from the sale of the book. It was revealed that Bill and Ruth Hawk already publicly distributed a multi-lith manuscript and had sold some of it. Neither my father's copy nor any of the other copies I've ever seen or heard of had been stamped loan copy or bore any such statement. He tried to claim that these were loan copies in AA Comes of Age, but that's fraudulent and dead wrong. Many of the Ohio members were also upset, but were told by my father that for the good of the fellowship, not to further hinder publication of the book. Meaning more than likely what he was doing here, Armitage explains it. The text that she's talking about is something that's mentioned in AA Comes of Age, and it's where Bill W. claims 400 mimeograph copies of the books were made and sent to everyone we could think of who might be concerned with a problem of alcoholism. Each mimeograph was stamped loan copy in order to protect our coming copyright. But that was actually a lie. There was no such stamp. There was no such mailed out copies. If the first printing, you see, wasn't copyrighted and the first mimeograph printings weren't, then copyright can get lost forever, Harvard Papers writes, and the book would have fallen into the public domain almost immediately. Wilson learned about this too late. He had already started selling mimeograph copies, and so he fabricated a story about how these mimeograph copies that he was giving out was just loaner copies for professionals and doctors and all these people that supposedly the first 100 Men organization claims all these doctors agreed with him. They hadn't even read the fucking book yet. More fraud here going on, folks. But anyway, he decided to change his story and say, oh, we were just loaning those out. We weren't actually selling those, because he was actually selling copies of the book and could have lost the copyright rights to it. More or less what's happening here, and I've heard there's even stories now of AA trying to sue people for reading parts of the big book unauthorized or printing it unauthorized, but the truth of the matter is, I don't know how well it would hold up in court, but the copyright of the first edition would have probably lapsed in and around 1967, and the copyright of the second edition would have lapsed in about 1983, if they had ever been valid copyrights, which they never were. The second edition of the Big Book contains both 12 steps and 12 traditions, so both have unquestionably been in the public domain since the 1980s, so I don't know if a lawsuit... Well, with the money AA has, I could do another video about that. AA throws a lot of money at ruining people who criticize it. And I'm going to skip here. It's more details about the 100 Men Corporation and the Works Publishing Corporation, and it's more information about... where money went, a couple of other different things. But, and then it goes on to say that once he was able to get sole copyright of the book, he was so eager to make money off of the book that he was already, the reason for the mimeograph copies, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be confusing everybody here. The reason for the mimeograph copies was because he was already trying to make a profit off of the book. And then when he found out that the 100 Men Corporation or the AA organization itself thought that everybody was going to be responsible for this book and they were all going to share profits. He had to hurry up and make a copyright for himself with sole authorship so he could get all the money. And I'm going to skip a little of these parts right here because there's more financial information and more documents and more. It's a whole lot of minute details about what money went where. Somebody got $20 here, somebody got $15 here, but you get kind of where I'm going with this. There was even some fighting between the first 100 members about the actual stories in the book that were part of the copyright itself, that Bill W. couldn't have signed could not sell what he did not actually own, and he fabricated more stories about it. And the funny thing here is that while all this is going on, while he was doing all these deals and he was doing all these crooked schemes and he was making up lies along the way and breaking promises to people, and like I said, I could go over every one of those minute details of every 32 authors that he cheated and everybody he ruined here, but I think it would fill up a lot of unnecessary time, and you can read the document for yourself because I'm going to link it in the video. But while he was doing all this, it said he was hypocritically telling other AA members to work unselfishly, abandon self-seeking, and have no thought of the profit motives at all, while he was busy trying to rig the whole entire thing where he made sure he was the sole owner of the big book. And he writes stuff like the unselfishness of these men as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. That comes from the doctor's opinion, which I don't remember how much the doctor was given or how the doctor was kind of hoodwinked into doing that, but he's writing a lie there in the doctor's opinion. Nobody was working tirelessly, absent of profit motive, with community spirit. Bill W. was busy fucking everybody over. And then Bill W. has the nerve to write selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our troubles. Above everything, alcoholics must be rid of the selfishness. We must or it kills us. What he's really saying is everybody else needs to be obedient little cult members and not question him and not argue with him and not try to make a big deal about, the money he was stealing off of everybody at the time, because you got to obey my commandments first. It goes on to say more about the Original Works Publishing Company. But it says that note that when the second edition of the Big Book was published in 1955, Bill W. carried out a Stalin-like purge of almost all the original AA book authors and all those old-timers who had been told that they would have a share in all of the profits and everything else, and everybody who could complain that Bill Wilson had broken all his promises to them. He had promised them they would all own the book in common, that all the profits would go to the Alcoholic Foundation, and what really happened was Bill W. ended up owning everything, got all the royalties from the book, and nobody else got anything, and he removed all their stories and replaced them with new stories by other authors who weren't promised anything. And then there was also the problem of relapsers. Fully 50% of the Big Book writers at the very beginning of this thing, that first 40, 50 that made up the thing, didn't maintain any sobriety at all. Bill W. never publicized that fact. He just silently replaced his stories with new ones from some other new AA enthusiasts who also grandly declared that AA had miraculously saved them from a life of drunkenness. Henry Parker's chapter in the front of the book to employers was left in, but his autobiographical story was taken out. He was not in a position to complain at that time because he had already died. He died, by the way, from alcohol-related illness. Dr. Bob's autobiographical chapter was left in, but he was able to get a share of some of the money so he wouldn't complain too much. And besides, he was a co-founder and his writings were considered the sacred words of God, so nobody was going to complain too much about that. But at the time, he was also dead, so he couldn't complain either during the time of the second edition. 3 other people were left in the book, but they were vastly outnumbered, if not dead, so they couldn't make much of a fuss, even if they wanted to. One of them was a member named Fitz M., whose story, Our Southern Friend, had to be left in because his story was also described at the end of the We Agnostic chapters. He's the one that heard God say, "Who are you to say there's no God?" which is a fucking ridiculous story in of itself. Besides, Fritz was also a true believer and he wouldn't complain. Clarence Snyder, the founder of the AA in Cleveland, was retained only to be dumped out by the time the 4th edition come around. But everybody else that was an original member who was an original part of this book getting put together pretty much got purged. The new Big Book authors got no promises about how we're all going to share ownership in the book. The new generation of authors clearly understood that Bill W. was the person who was going to be supported for the rest of his life in comfort, while they would get nothing for their stories because the stories are service work. Bill's behavior was typical of someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, Orange writes. Dr. Alexander Lowen said, "A striving for power and control characterizes all narcissistic individuals. Not every narcissist gains power. Not every person with power is a narcissist, but a need for power is a part of their disorder." And it says, and then he outlines a table here with everybody who was a part of the original membership, like Lloyd Tate, Ray Campbell, Horace Mayer, Myron Williams, Ralph Furlong, Norman Hunt, Henry Zeller, Harold Sears, Paul Stanley, Wallace Gilliam, and the names go on and on and on. All those people, they never existed when the second edition come out. Never heard anything more about them. Never heard anything else. They were just gone, dumped out of the book, because most of them probably weren't around at the time. It is interesting to note that the actual first female member of AA who wrote in the big book was Florence Rankin. Her original story was called A Feminine Victory, and it says she relapsed and later just vanished, more or less, probably just didn't come back to AA any longer. There's a lot to unpack here, but there's even another page that goes on with more, but I think you get the idea here. Bill W. himself had a whole lot of people help craft this book and put it together. He had a whole lot of people do editing for him because apparently his writing style was so terrible that even they couldn't tolerate printing that. They more or less looked at it and said, "You can't print this shit. It's just it's too bad, you know." And he sneakily got a copyright and fucked everybody over who was responsible for helping put this whole entire thing together. And again, even with all the help and even with all the teamwork that was behind this book, it's still garbage. It's still a bunch of loaded logical fallacies. It's still a bunch of baseless assertions. It is not a cure for alcoholism. There is no such thing as alcoholism. I have to constantly try to purge the word alcoholism from my vocabulary because it doesn't exist. And yeah, the whole entire thing is based on a bunch of lies and manipulation and bullshit. Bill's bullshit, to be honest. And I think that's pretty much everything that I could come up with for this week on this one. I kind of wandered and meandered all over the place with that one, but if you got anything out of it or if you have any further information, chime in on the comments and let me know. But yeah, the party line story of these two guys sitting down at Bill W.'s table there, him and Abby, and this whole magical program just appearing as a result of it is all bullshit. And the funny part about it is they hide the history of what really happened, and even with this kind of stuff being uncovered, we still don't have the full original history because people like Bob didn't want to make the fellowship look bad. If you have to lie for your organization, if you have to tell lies about your organization, if you have to make up myths as to how your organization was created, then you are dishonest in order to cover up something, which means that, yeah, it's probably fraudulent, the whole entire thing. Until next time.